Hello and welcome to another video here on my channel. Today we're going to look at my top 10 disappointing games of 2018. Yes indeed, I've done one of these videos 2 years ago, I think it was. And it wasn't really games, it was a mix of games and general dissatisfaction with the industry at the time. But this year I actually have a list of 10 games that is disappointing. A sad day, to say the least, at least. So this game aren't as, what do you say, disappointing as some other games, but I will just say, let's just jump into this crap. Anyway, number 10 are going to be Darksiders 3. Darksiders 3 on this list mainly because it isn't as big and exciting as the previous games was. It is still a good game for what it is, and it's still got great atmosphere, it got the great gameplay. It just doesn't have the thing that you really wanted from Darksiders essentially. It's still, as I said, it's a good game in my opinion. It still got what you wanted when it comes to the world and etc. and the storyline, but overall it just doesn't come up to the greatness that the previous two games were essentially. Number 9, Just Cause 4. Just Cause 4 doesn't really evolve anything from these previous games as Darksiders 3 was. Just Cause 4 are still a great game. It's still got all the explosions, the gameplay, and it's got a somewhat interesting storyline and gameplay, but overall it just feels too much the same. It just isn't a big step forward in my opinion. It just feels like an expansion essentially. That is why it is a disappointing game. Number 8, Battlefield 5. Battlefield 5 are disappointing mainly because it isn't released as a complete game. It had a lot of controversy before, but I don't really care about that. I just care about if the game are complete and what you get are actually good. And even if the atmosphere looks good, it is mechanical, when it comes to gameplay it is still good. It doesn't really have enough of modes, it doesn't really have enough maps in order to make me interested. The story, the single player content isn't really that interesting as well, even though it is similar to Battlefield 1. The storylines aren't that interesting, and the game just feels unfinished and lackluster. When a lot of the contents are released after the release date, you know they has messed up. I think at least if they don't just want to make this into a game as a service game, and I don't like that kind of model because I want to have the game at launch. I don't want to wait several months in order to get the content that maybe 5 years ago you would have got them at the release date. So yeah. Number 7 is an expansion. It is World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. This one will probably be on my top 10 list for best games as well, but this is mainly because of the end game content. Overall I think the expansion are fun, it has decent storylines that are interesting. I thought about this in the review in more detail, but I think the storylines for both the factions are great. I think the areas or the new continents are still amazing looking and it's interesting. The problem I feel it have at the moment, and which makes me a little bit disappointed, is that they don't release enough content for the end game. At the moment, for the amount I have played, I just felt burned out of the game just after 2 months, and that is not good for an MMO essentially. If the end game content isn't interesting enough to keep you play longer than 2 months after release, you essentially have screwed up. Essentially, you need to give the players more content in order to make them more interested. In previous expansions you have quest lines that you could do, you had, well, factions that had interesting quest lines that you could do over in order to essentially grind reputation. Nowadays, the reputation you gain it through world quests, essentially that it is called, and it's essentially the same week after week, and it is essentially daily quests. You don't really have the in-game quest lines that you really want. It just is the same grinding, and it just isn't fun anymore. So that is why it is so disappointing, essentially. Number 6, State of Decay 2. State of Decay 2 essentially are on this list because of how broken it was or buggy and glitchy and sometimes game breaking it was at launch. It is one of the 2 games that Microsoft tried to release on Game Pass the day of the release, which is essentially world release, and if they're essentially trying to do what Netflix does, and I think they're doing a great job for the most part, but when you release a game in this date, it was just sometimes the single player part essentially are the most playable one. It is essentially, you can call it essentially an expansion to the first game. You have some extras that essentially you can call a little bit of a sequel, but overall it is the same experience as the first one. You build up the camp, you try to save people, you try to keep them alive. If you fail, they die forever, etc, etc. It essentially is a survival game, and they got all of that down, but when it comes to the co-op thing, it just was buggy and glitchy at launch, and it just didn't work, in my opinion. People will defend it and say it works now, but when you launch a game in that state, I will not give them the benefit of the doubt that they will release games in a better state in the future. So yeah. Number 5, Be Happy Few. The same problem here. It was a buggy and glitchy mess with sometimes game-breaking bugs, essentially. Overall, the atmosphere, the world, and the characters are interesting and fun, and it essentially have a feeling of Bioshock, essentially, and you really wanted to know more about the world. But when it comes to the glitches and the bugs and etc., it just take you out of the world. You don't really like it anymore. It just breaks the emotion, the atmosphere just feels not fun anymore. Number 4, Dynasty Warriors 9. This game I put on the list mainly because I usually like these Mushu games, I think it's called. Essentially, Koei Tecmo release a lot of, and the Mega Force essentially release a lot of games that you essentially are playing like very powerful characters that take on hordes and hordes of soldiers, essentially. I usually like them, but Dynasty Warriors 9 just didn't have the content that you expect from Dynasty Warriors 9, and it just wasn't up to par to the previous games. When they have released titles such as Dragon Quest Heroes, Hyrule Warriors, etc, etc, and you release this, you essentially expect more than what Dynasty Warriors 9 essentially gave you. I'm getting a little bit tired that they don't really give you the content that were in previous games. At launch, you essentially need to buy them in microtransactions, etc, etc. I'm just tired of it, and that is why Dynasty Warriors 9 are just this low. Number 3, this will people hate me for, but Sea of Thieves. It is a gas game, or game as a service. It released with, in my opinion, no content at launch. You essentially have 3 missions types that you did over and over again without any story or anything. You essentially wanted to be the legendary pirate, but yeah, gameplay wise it is fine until it is fighting, because it is was really slow, really lackluster, at least at launch. I haven't played it since the launch date. I just don't care about it anymore. They have released a lot of content after that, but first impressions are everything in my opinion, and if you don't really give you a great impression when you release the game, I will just skip the game altogether. And I don't like games that release content after and expecting people to come back, because if you release an empty game at the start, you can't expect people to stand around for a majority of time. COC is overall a beautiful looking game. It goes the art style I really like, but overall, when it had no content at launch, in my opinion, you can say whatever you want when it comes to content, but it was just empty and shallow. It just wasn't a great experience, essentially. Number 2, this was kind of obvious, maybe, Fallout 76. Fallout 76 have a mix of both bugs, glitches and emptiness. The world is empty, it doesn't have anything to do, it essentially has the same grindy quests all over again. It has some building thing from Fallout 4 and etc. It has some of the styles that is from the previous Fallout game, but overall it is an empty game with it is so repetitive. It is essentially the same over and over again that you don't really feel like it's a great anymore. After you play maybe for 4 or 5 hours, you will basically be tired of it. The storyline are just lackluster. It doesn't really give you any context that you want, and the bugs and glitches are just horrible. It is game breaking sometimes. It is just Bethesda have just, they have essentially made me wanna skip more Bethesda games in the future, because if they release a game in this kind of state, you just no Bethesda, no. Number 1, this one, well, it is worse than Fallout 76, and it is the biggest disappointment of the year, The Quiet Man. I usually don't like to call games bad. I haven't seen a bad game, essentially. It just is not fun, and that is the worst thing you can say about a game, essentially, in my opinion. But The Quiet Man is for the most part disappointing, because it is a bad game. It isn't really a game, it is for the most part an interactive movie. Well, it's a bad name, but it feels like that. It is really slow, it is big times between the gameplay, and the storyline at launch wasn't, you don't really understand it. They needed a DLC after release, to give you the context of the storyline, and for this sort of game that essentially it is a single player game that you play through in 2 to 3 hours, I think it was, and you expect them to replay it just 1 week after, people will just say no. You can't release a game that is unfinished when it comes to storyline, etc. in this way and expect people to like it. The animations are bad, and yeah, the kind of band are just this huge disappointment, and don't play it. Yeah. So that was my list of disappointing games this year. I hope next year is better, because this year was lackluster when it comes to many games, because many games will just release broken, buggy, and some will just with no content. Hopefully more better games released next year, so yeah. That's all for today, folks. Watch you next time.